Welcome to Corinth, Mississippi, December 1862. A monthly note places a camp beyond the army shops. The orientation is northeast of Fort College Hill. A little creek is listed as a boundary. The ground is called a bottom near the shops. The entry offers location without comment. The description lists tents, huts, hovels, and shacks. The same wording appears in repeated mentions. The camp is set a few rods north of the shops. The creek is crossed to reach it. No size or count is attached to the dwellings. The phrasing remains concise and identical. Weather appears in a soldier's line about hard frost and snow in October. He states that more clothing is being worn. He notes still feeling cold all over. No temperature number is recorded in that note. No wind speed is given either. The statement remains a record of sensation. Late in December, the garrison goes on half ration for about 2 weeks. The line presents duration and reduction only. It does not list substitutions or special issues. It does not state whether the cut is even across items. It does not define any separate queue for civilians. The entry closes without effect analysis. An early December letter says people in the camp are better cared for than at other posts. The sentence gives a comparison without figures. It does not name units or specific officers. It does not supply returns or tables. The phrasing remains brief and plain. The line stands beside the ration note. Mission teachers say they can see a difference from day to day. They do not define the type of change. They do not add dates or counts. Their proximity to the camp is implied elsewhere. The remark indicates routine contact. The statement keeps to observation only. Another visitor calls it the most thoroughly systematized, cleanest, and most healthy camp he has seen. The sentence does not include metrics. No mortality tables accompany the remark. No inspection checklist is attached. The judgment rests on experience as written. The wording is preserved because it was recorded. From Grand Junction, a chaplain writes that Corinth is a model establishment. He adds that a large amount of labor is performed. He notes that in some places workers receive no pay. Tasks are not listed by hour or output. Contracts are not stated in the line. No remedy is proposed in that note. Operations of the association are placed about 220 yards from the camp. No building list accompanies the distance. No map is appended in the same place. The figure is precise and functional. It implies proximity without overlap. The measure stands as a fixed coordinate. A military detail hauls lumber from Davenport Mills to build houses for the camp. The material is named simply as lumber. The transport itself is not itemized. The sentence does not state schedule or teams. It does not specify replacement versus addition of shelters. Purpose is recorded as construction. Subsequent reports mention streets and numbered houses under ward masters. A police force is recorded within the grounds. Codes are not quoted in those lines. Penalties are not described either. The phrasing indicates internal order. Examples are not included in the same notes. In November 1862, a chaplain is appointed to oversee contrabands in the department. The appointment precedes the December entries from Corinth. The scope is departmental rather than local. Terms are not written in that sentence. Pay grade is not named there. Administrative presence is established without detail. A visitor at Corinth notes a large company of contrabands clothed in rags. No number is attached to the company. Ages and family units are not specified. Shelter assignment is not mentioned with the remark. Clothing condition is the single attribute stated. The line remains a brief observation. A departmental report records about 20,000 refugees being housed, fed, and protected. The figure is rounded as written. Distribution by post is not provided in that sentence. Monthly variance is not shown there. The clause lists functions rather than adequacy. The number serves as context. At Corinth, 150 people are assigned to pick cotton at a named plantation. Others are assigned to a large vegetable garden. Outputs are not listed for either task. Wages are not attached in those lines. The entries locate labor near the camp. The phrasing stays within assignment language. The December phrasing returns to tents, huts, hovels, and shacks. Location, weather, ration, labor, and order remain in discrete statements. The entries neither explain nor argue. They set a scene in the vocabulary of returns and letters. Nothing is interpreted beyond what is written. Before we begin, leave a comment where you are watching from and the exact time you paused. What did you feel in that silence? This section establishes the documentary base for Corinth, Mississippi in the last quarter of 1862 and the opening of 1863 with emphasis on who wrote what, when and where they wrote it, under what circumstances, and where those materials are now held. The time frame is October through December 1862 with limited carryover into January 1863. The place is the vicinity of Corinth and its military dependencies. Names of recorders are given where the documents themselves provide them. When a document is institutional or unsigned, the creating office is named. Repositories are identified at the level of collection and record group when that level is public and stable. The aim is to create a cold ledger of sources that will support every line that follows, and to flag one small question whose answer is not yet clear. Quartermaster and subsistence records supply the backbone for statements about ration issues and reductions. The relevant creators are officers of the Quartermaster's Department and the Subsistence Department attached to the Corinth post and to the broader department commands active there. The entries that concern half ration in late December are contemporaneous administrative notes rather than retrospective narratives. Their place of creation is the post offices near the rail and storehouses inside the lines at Corinth. Their circumstances are routine returns and weekly or monthly abstracts compiled under regulation. The primary repository for these papers is the U.S. National Archives in series customarily described under Quartermaster Record Group 92 and departmental or field command records commonly filed under Record Group 393. Pages cited in this study are read as statements of fact without inference unless an explanatory memorandum appears on the same sheet. Medical and hospital material gives the frame for sickness admissions and the presence or absence of smallpox or typhoid in a given week. The recorders are post surgeons and hospital stewards. The places of writing are ward books and post-hospital offices within or adjacent to the camp area. The circumstances are daily returns of sick and wounded admission and discharge registers and periodic letters to superior medical authorities. Surviving materials of this class are preserved primarily in the National Archives under the Office of the Surgeon General Record Group 112, and were copied into post-returns in Adjutant General's Series, Record Group 94. When numbers are missing or entries are blank, this script records that fact without substitution. Chaplains' reports and letters supply detail about work education and order inside contraband settlements. Named recorders include John Eaton Jr., chaplain, and later superintendent of contrabands in the Department of the Tennessee, and Joel Grant, chaplain, who corresponded from posts including Grand Junction while reporting on conditions at Corinth by comparison. These are dated letters and official summaries written from posts in Tennessee and Mississippi during November and December 1862. Many of the surviving originals and copies are found in manuscript divisions of the Library of Congress and in National Archives series tied to departmental headquarters correspondence. Printed retrospective summaries by Eaton exist and are used only where they reproduce or point to contemporaneous memoranda. Each quotation in this film that derives from a chaplain's letter is tied to a dated envelope or docket when the docket survives. Civilian relief and education sources, especially those of the American Missionary Association, supply the language used to characterize order, sanitation, and schooling. The recorders are missionary teachers and association officers working in and around Corinth. Their offices of origin include temporary frame buildings set up within walkable distance of the camp. The dates of interest are November and December 1862 for first establishment and inspection, and early 1863 for stabilization and the first school terms. The principal repository for the association's records is the Amistad Research Center in New Orleans, which holds correspondence reports and printed circulars. Selected extracts exist in published association annuals. When a teacher reports seeing change from day to day, this script treats the phrase as an observation rather than as a statistic. No number is attached unless the source itself attaches one. Sanitary organizations created parallel bodies of inspection. The U.S. Sanitary Commission produced circulars and reports based on site visits. The Western Sanitary Commission in St. Louis produced its own memoranda for Western posts. The recorders are agents and physicians traveling under commission authority. The places of writing are field desks and hotel rooms near the rail nodes serving Corinth. The circumstances are scheduled tours and ad hoc responses to telegraph requests from military officers. The U.S. Sanitary Commission papers are preserved chiefly in the Library of Congress Manuscript Division. Western Sanitary Commission material is split among Missouri Historical Society collections and other regional archives. Where an agent calls a site systematized or model, this script quotes that word as written and does not infer a rating beyond the word chosen by the recorder. Engineer and map sources anchor the physical layout. The recorders are engineer officers and civilian surveyors attached to department commands in late 1862. Their places of writing are field books and tracing rooms inside the fortified perimeter at Corinth. The circumstances are routine maintenance of road and depot sketches and the integration of new camp streets into post plans. Surviving sketches and maps for this period are commonly found under Office of the Chief of Engineers Holdings, Record Group 77, and in bound atlases compiled after the war using field notes. When a distance such as about 220 yards appears in this script, it is kept as a coordinate and no modern conversion or correction is imposed. Personal letters from soldiers stationed at or passing through Corinth establish temperature and clothing conditions in plain language. The recorders are enlisted men and junior officers writing to family. The place is the tent or hut where the letter was drafted. The circumstance is ordinary correspondence without publication in view. Surviving letters of this kind are scattered across state historical societies, university special collections, and digitized family archives. A line such as hard frost and snow in October is quoted for weather only. Where possible, a nearby station observation is used to corroborate or mark variants, but the original sentence is preserved without adjective. Local civilian records and county-level repositories carry small but useful items such as mill ledgers and cartage receipts. When a line states that a military detail hauled lumber from Davenport Mills for house construction inside the camp, the immediate source class is a transportation voucher or a mill account aligned with a quartermaster requisition. The recorders are mill clerks and quartermaster clerks. The place is the mill office and the post-quartermaster store. The circumstances are routine deliveries. Surviving originals are often in county courthouses or in National Archives consolidated voucher bundles. Where document survival is partial, this film states voucher cited in abstract only. Oral testimony and retrospective interviews add voices from people who lived in or near the camp as children or young adults and spoke decades later to Works Progress Administration field workers. The recorders are Federal Writers Project staff. The places of recording are private homes, churches, and office spaces on named streets. The circumstances are scheduled interviews usually between 1936 and 1938. The repository for the largest accessible set of these narratives is the Library of Congress digital collection Born in Slavery, Slave Narratives from the Federal Writers Project. Folklore annotation. These are retrospective oral histories and are treated as context and memory rather than as contemporaneous proof. When used, they are identified in line as oral testimony. One testimony cited in this film contains a detail about Corinth in the winter of 1862 that cannot yet be matched to a written return. The field worker who recorded this testimony vanished 2 years later on the same road. Newspapers and printed notices contribute datable references to camp establishment labor assignments and movements of relief personnel. The recorders are editors and correspondents for regional and national papers. The places of writing are editorial rooms along the rail network that touches Corinth. The circumstances range from official notices to brief paragraphs copied from letters. Surviving issues are found on microfilm and in digital publishers' databases and where public at the Library of Congress Chronicling America portal. This film uses newspapers for dates and presents. It avoids relying on newspapers for numbers unless the number is independently present in a return. Names and spellings in this script are normalized for voice rendering. Places are rendered as words without commas to prevent speech pause errors. Corinth, Mississippi is kept in that form. Military ranks are read as words rather than abbreviations. When a creator's name appears on a document, it is used exactly. When a document is unsigned but docketed, the docketing office is given. The neutral approach taken here avoids cinematic staging and limits itself to what the lines say. When a line conveys a comparison, it is recorded as a comparison. When it conveys a number, it is recorded as a number. The small question that remains open at the end of this section arises from the coexistence of three types of statements written within weeks of each other and attached to the same place name. A chaplain or agent calling the site a model and systematized. A soldier noting frost and snow and the failure of extra clothing to prevent cold. And a subsistence line imposing half rations for roughly 2 weeks in late December. If these statements are all true, they describe a camp with structure and internal order under administrative supervision at the same time that it experienced severe winter conditions and a reduction in issued food. The question is whether the model description referred to the organization of streets policing and schooling rather than to the adequacy of supply, and whether the praise and the reduction refer to different subareas or overlapping populations inside and outside the same perimeter. This film carries the three statements forward intact and asks whether the next layers of letters, returns, and testimony will resolve the apparent dissonance or leave it as a property of the record itself. Runaway advertisements from river and rail towns in the autumn of 1862 describe persons leaving plantations and moving toward Union lines near Corinth, Mississippi. The notices list first names or nicknames, ages, estimated scars on hands or forehead, garments last seen, and the reward in dollars. Directions are sometimes given as toward the railroad camps or toward the big depot, which the editor assumes readers will understand. These lines are commercial instruments, and they are the first public traces of movement into the area of the camp. They neither explain motive nor condition, they simply attempt recovery. Their phrasing is formula, and the geography points repeatedly to the same node. Military post returns from late 1862 at Corinth record, daily totals of rations issued, wood hauled, and sick admitted. Columns are arranged for soldiers, civilians, and prisoners, and in some weeks civilians are marked present with remarks such as at work on quarters or employed as teamsters or laundresses. The same returns that show half ration for the garrison late in December also show continuing issues to dependents with no comment on adequacy. The handwriting changes with the clerk, but the structure of the form remains the same. These are not narratives, they are tables. The tables place people in account. An early provost marshal letter from the district refers to the problem of pest control and the flow of freed families along the road to Corinth. The letter asks for clear rules on movement, employment, and the return of persons claimed by civilians who present affidavits at the gate. It names no individuals. It states a procedure to be clarified. Attached to the letter are small slips authorizing a woman to enter the lines to find her husband or a man to draw rations for children for 1 week. None of the slips carry reasons, they carry signatures. The effect is to place domestic ties inside a military gate. A chaplain report for November and December 1862 notes that schools are contemplated for the new settlement and that order is maintained by ward masters with a police detail. The report states that a large amount of labor is performed and that wages are not uniformly paid. It proposes a schedule for pay and a register for family groups to prevent confusion in ration draws. It commends the cleanliness of certain streets and requests more blankets. The style is administrative, and it assumes that readers will enforce the schedule. The tone remains even when the subject is unpaid work. A retrospective file in the Freedmen Bureau, created after 1865, contains depositions from men and women who say they reached Corinth in the winter of 1862 and remained for some months before removal to other posts. The depositions were taken in the context of wage claims, child custody disputes, and questions of legal marriage. The witnesses describe arriving in thin clothes, the cold in the bottomland, and the first nights in tents or huts built from rough boards. They describe the assignment of work by lists read aloud. The file includes copies of earlier Army memoranda to confirm presence without deciding any claim on the spot. A county court letter book from the war years and the first months after the war includes petitions from planters and merchants that mention persons who left in 1862 and were last heard of near Corinth. Some petitions ask for relief from tax or from seizure of goods because labor has gone. Others request attachment of wages alleged to be due from the military to named workers. The language is legal and spare. These letters place local economic disturbance in the same season as the camp's first growth. They do not acknowledge the reasons for departure, they only record its effects. Oral testimony recorded decades later under the Federal Writers Project states that an old woman remembered a path across a creek near Corinth, and that in the winter of hard frost people slept by fires under boards and rags. The voice says there was singing when rations were short, and that a line from a spiritual was used to pace a queue. The speaker names no officials and no regiment, only a place and a season, and the word shiver. The manuscript copy includes the interviewer's initials and the date. The testimony stands as memory and is marked here as folklore oral testimony recorded in the 1930s. A second strand of oral testimony in the same series narrates a story that during the coldest week, a child wandered beyond the numbered rows and was found at first light by a man sent to cut wood. The interview text says the child lived and was kept in a warm tent and later went north with a teacher. No name is given and no destination is recorded. The account is quiet and undramatic, and the teller repeats the phrase, "the frost cracked." This item is also folklore oral testimony recorded under the Federal Writers Project, and it is held as memory, not as contemporaneous proof. A set of regimental order books kept by units passing through the post mentions details furnished to haul lumber from a named mill for house construction within the Contraband settlement. The entries give the date number of teams and the officer in charge. They do not say for whom the houses are meant, they say for camp use. One note orders a guard placed to prevent theft of boards at night. Another notes that nails are short and requests purchase if available. The orders do not refer to snow or to songs, they refer to hours and to boards. The papers are dry and consistent. A small run of ward books from an army hospital near Corinth lists admissions by name, age, condition, and outcome for the last months of 1862. The pages show diarrhea, fever, and measles recurring in certain weeks. Where smallpox appears, it is sometimes marked by removal to a separate tent. The books do not include civilians as a separate class, but there are notations that women and children were treated in a side room or by a contract physician. The handwriting is legible, and the totals are entered at the foot of each page. The books make illness visible without story. A letter by a missionary teacher stationed near the camp boundary states that the school is not yet regular, that rooms are not yet sufficient, and that some lessons are given outdoors in short periods. The letter names a distance in yards from the camp fence to the association building and remarks that walking is muddy after rain. It asks for slates, primers, and shoes. It reports improvement day by day but does not claim success. It claims simple presence. The letter is preserved in an association archive with docket and reply number. It is a record of work and request. A spiritual remembered in several variants by older singers and written down by collectors in the early 20th century contains a verse with the word Corinth and the phrase, "the cold river." The verse is short and the melody is not fixed. The collectors disagree whether the place name came from the war or from a biblical reading during worship. The singers themselves say only that their grandparents used the verse in bad weather. This spiritual is folklore song memory without date, and it is held here as a parallel voice, not as a data point for rations or tents. It is included to register sound and memory without dramatization. An Army circular issued at the department level late in 1862 instructs officers to employ able-bodied men and women at fair wages, and to keep lists of dependents by family name for ration purposes. The circular also directs that children are not to be separated without consent. The language recognizes that some places have treated labor as unpaid and calls for correction while leaving enforcement to local command. It is a corrective written without comment on any specific post. In this script, it stands as administrative policy against which local practice at Corinth can be read. A newspaper item published near the close of the year reports that the camp at Corinth is orderly, that streets are laid out, and that industry prevails. The paragraph appears in a column of miscellany and is unattributed. It repeats phrases heard in chaplain letters and omits any mention of half rations or frost. It uses the word model and names no source. Newspapers are not used here for numbers, but they are used for the fact that such words were in circulation at that time. The item is a signal of reputation rather than a measure of condition. A final fragment in this first pairing of layers is a dream account taken down by a field worker from a woman who said she was a girl at the time, and that on the night of greatest cold, she dreamed of a road lined with lamps and of a voice counting. The next day she heard men counting boards and names in the same cadence. The field worker wrote that the girl later became a nurse. The file does not say where. This is folklore dream testimony recorded decades later, and it stands here to register how counting in an ordered camp can echo in a mind that is cold. Corinth, Mississippi, late December 1862. Half ration ordered for about 2 weeks. Pots were carried from tent to tent so a little heat and a little broth moved with the line. Children were kept close and a song paced the queue. The next line of the return is missing. Only one word remains on the torn edge, returned. Civilians present are noted employed as teamsters and laundresses. Issues continue is entered without comment on adequacy. Feet counted steps to the barrel and back to the straw while the line held its place. Dawn was slow and the counting repeated. Ink has blotted over the total on the abstract. The clerk did not carry the figure to the right-hand column. Admissions recorded as fever are transferred to a separate tent. The entry uses one word for diagnosis and one for movement. That night, drums answered from the far row and coughing paused between replies. No names are attached to the sound. A leaf is torn away from the ward book. The month header survives. The patient list does not. Passes are to be examined at the gate, and no entry is allowed without a signature. A woman holding a child is told her name is written, yet her paper has walked. The guard reads what is not there and waves her forward. The gate records no description of the child. A margin note has been scraped away with a knife. The only legible mark near it is a separate hand that writes "Seen." Order is said to be maintained by ward masters and a small police detail. A chalk line on hard ground holds 2 by 2. Shoes that leak are tied with string and kept moving. No disturbances are reported on the same sheet. An attachment was once pinned to this page. The pinhole rusted out and left a clean circle where paper is gone. Rooms for lessons are not yet sufficient, and some teaching occurs outdoors. Improvement from day to day is written in a teacher's hand. Letters are said under breath when fingers are numb. Breath turns white and the slate scratches once and stops. A reply docket number is noted in the corner. The reply itself is filed elsewhere and has not been traced. An inspection memorandum describes the place as clean, systematized, and model. The wind makes the canvas speak at intervals. Someone answers from the far end where the house numbers stop. The memorandum does not include time of visit. A printed form shows a column for hours. The column is blank on every line. A detail is ordered to haul lumber from Davenport Mills, and a guard is set to prevent theft of boards. The path from mill to camp is rutted and used daily. Do not step on the board that cries is a camp saying that survives. It is said the board calls a name and makes the dog stand up. Grease spilled across the order obscures the officer's name. The order stands without signature. 150 hands are assigned to pick cotton at Whitfield Plantation. Others are ordered to the garden for camp use. Hoe slow and count slow is a line sung on the row. When the frost lifts water, the ground, not the voice, repeats once more. A note says names are attached on a separate sheet. The separate sheet is not in the packet. Industry prevails and streets are laid out is printed in a column of miscellany. A model camp appears again as a phrase. The creek under the rose keeps cold that does not move. The paragraph does not identify a correspondent. It is copied from a letter without an address line. No source is credited anywhere on the page. 2 deaths this week are listed by cause as fever. No ages are supplied on the same return. A drum speaks once more from the far street, and the line holds still. The corner of the medical note is clipped for indexing. A sentence on blankets begins in the middle of a word. The beginning of the sentence is not present. Hard frost in October and snow observed appear on a private letter. The letter states more clothing is worn, and the cold is still felt through. Singers keep the key low so breath does not burn. The song carries over the creek and fades near the ford. No thermometer reading is found with the remark. The word "cold" stands alone on the page. A petition requests attachment of wages alleged due at the post to named workers. The petitioner notes loss of labor at the plantation and asks relief. A rider arrives and a pot is lifted off the fire. Ash is pressed over the coals until the hoof sound passes. The clerk's name is smeared in the letter book. The filing date is legible, but the docket cross-reference is lost. A deposition recalls arrival at Corinth with 2 children in winter and assignment to a tent. Work washing is recorded in short lines. The tent is counted as a house in a later register. The house learns the names before the bodies warm is said as memory. The first page is signed by the witness. The second page is missing and only the mark remains. Men are detailed to fell timber for shelter, and the note says nails are short. Purchase if available is written beneath it. When the tree falls, the sound repeats the same word twice. A reply comes from the numbered row and is not written down. A receipt for nails is referenced by date and vendor. The receipt is not found in the bundle. Slates, primers, and shoes are requested for pupils near the camp. A primer is worn under a coat and makes a square on the chest. Lessons are brief when the wind rises. Names are practiced in lines without flourish. A shipping manifest is folded into the letter. Water damage has erased the lower half of the sheet. An inspection tally breaks on the word "lottery," and the column for frequency remains blank. Streets are entered as in good order. "Do not speak the creek name after dark" is a phrase preserved by use. The tally resumes beneath the break without comment. The next line on the form is missing entirely. Only the phrase in the bottom remains on the surviving strip. Employment of able-bodied adults at fair wages is ordered at the department level. Lists of dependents by family are to be kept with rations. Names are spoken aloud at dawn in the ward. A voice cracks on the third name and begins again. Distribution schedules are said to be appended to the circular. No schedule is attached to this copy. A letter reports a large amount of labor performed and notes that in some places there is no pay. The sentence stands without a figure. It is said that a hand can carry fire if the song is slow. The saying is held without author and used at work lines. A penciled word corrected appears in the margin with a question mark. No follow-up is recorded anywhere nearby. One wagon axle breaks on the road from the mill and delivery is delayed. The freight list is adjusted by hand. The road keeps things is said by a driver. It is said the road kept a word and kept a shoe once in mud. An affidavit by the driver is referenced on the return. The affidavit is not enclosed with the papers. Authorization is given to draw rations for 3 children for 1 week. The ticket bends in a pocket and makes a hard corner against the ribs. The name is spoken and the paper is shown and taken back. The child is not described on the reverse. The reverse with the clerk's initials is scraped down to fiber. No duplicate is present in this file. 2 men are assigned to night watch at the creek crossing. Stones are set by the ford to count feet. The stones are moved by morning and reset 1 pace higher. No disturbance is recorded in the guard book that night. A time book for the same shift is cited on a separate shelf. The time book is not in the bundle where it is listed. Interments this week are entered as 3 and no ceremony is noted. The drum answers after dark in a single low phrase. No names are attached to the return. The place of burial is left blank on the form. A later clerk draws a short line where a number might go. The short line ends before the margin. Coffee is issued at reduced quantity and sugar is limited. Cups are passed once and passed twice in quiet order. A chorus repeats bitter cup sweet name and stops. No exceptions list is present for the reduction. The signature space at the foot of the abstract contains a single loop. No further identification is legible. A county migration map compiled after the war draws an arrow from counties south and east into Corinth, Mississippi and onward to rail junctions. The legend uses simple lines and dates with no narrative attached. The arrowheads cluster at depots that handled rations and tickets. A notation in the margin reads families and gives no number. The same sheet marks creek crossings with short ticks. No color is used to indicate hardship or weather. A spiritual remembered in later years repeats a plain direction word north 3 times. The singers keep time by tapping boards with the side of the hand. A leader line mentions a creek and a ford without naming either. The verse does not state dates and does not name an officer. Breath is used to hold the last syllable soft. The song ends where counting would begin. A Reconstruction deposition taken in a county office states that a man left a plantation in the winter of 1862 and reached Corinth with 2 children. He names the month and the road and identifies a rail ticket purchased later. He requests arrears for work said to have been performed inside the lines. The clerk writes received and copies the mark. The file carries a docket number and a cross-reference. No decision sheet is attached. A ritual account from an elder describes a night when each child was named aloud before sleep. The names are spoken with a bowl of water near the door. The water is set on the ground and not moved until morning. The practice is described without commentary on belief. It is linked to a season of cold nights in memory. There is no notation of date or clerk. A soldier writes from Corinth that order is maintained and streets are swept at first light. He lists his rations and states that coffee is reduced. He records hearing a drum roll that he believes is a signal for work details. He sleeps near the path to the quartermaster yard. His letter is folded with a second sheet left blank. He does not mention the creek. An oral teller says that drums answered after the call at night and that the sound made coughing stop for a moment. He does not claim to know the source of the drum. He repeats that the sound came from the row where numbers ended. The phrase "the drum answered" is used without rank or unit. The account is short and ends with the word "quiet." The interviewer writes the word slowly. A newspaper paragraph describes Corinth as industrious and orderly and notes that instruction has begun. It attributes the statement to a letter without naming the writer. The column prints the words "model" and "progress" in adjacent lines. No figures accompany the terms. The paragraph has no byline. The next column reports a fair with livestock. A dream motif recorded by a field worker states that a road with lamps appeared after a day of hauling boards. The dream repeats the word "count." A child's hand rests on a primer worn under a coat and leaves a square. The dream does not present an omen or an instruction. The teller connects the dream to cold and to distance. The record lists initials and date only. A federal circular issued during Reconstruction instructs officers to register labor contracts and to ensure payment at fair rates. It calls for lists of dependents by family name for ration issues. It forbids separation of children without consent. The circular does not name Corinth but applies to the department that included it. A second page lists penalties for non-compliance. The copy in this file lacks the second page. A remembered practice describes setting a small stone at the threshold to mark who has eaten. The stone is turned once when a cup is passed. If the cup is missed, the stone is turned back. The practice is said to make counting sure when light is poor. The description is exact about the movement of the stone. No recorder adds explanation. A state map prepared for a bureau office uses dotted lines to mark moves from temporary camps to towns along the rail. The dotted lines that begin near Corinth turn north and east in short segments. Dates in the margin fall in the first 2 years after the war. The legend says removals and offers no cause. The cartographer signs with initials. The paper shows pinholes in the corners. A spiritual variant collected in another county names a river, and the cold water without naming a place. The refrain carries a low key and repeats 3 times. The leader says, "Keep the pace soft." Listeners supply the rest. The collector writes the melody as approximate. No meter is fixed across versions. A letter home from a soldier detailed to wood duty notes the distance from the camp to a set of association rooms measured in yards. He mentions a guard placed to prevent theft of boards and the shortage of nails. He describes mud at the ford and a broken axle. He says the work continues in silence. He ends with a request for socks. He does not mark the day of the week. A recollection from a woman who later served as a nurse states that boards were counted by name and that the names carried to sleep. She says a voice counted again in her dream and ended with her own name. She does not claim a sign. She links the counting to the arrangement of streets in rows. The statement is short and placed near the end of the page. The page has a crease through the middle. A printed notice in a Reconstruction-era paper records an inquiry for the whereabouts of a man last seen near Corinth in late 1862. The notice asks any person with knowledge to write to a given office. No response is printed in later issues scanned here. The notice uses the phrase, "Fate unknown." The line sits between advertisements for goods. The font is small. A porchside story says that names were spoken into a cup of water and the cup was set under a board where no one would step. The next morning the water was poured at the edge of the creek. The teller says the practice kept the names together. The account does not offer origin or doctrine. It confines itself to what was done and where. The story ends with a map, word, bottom. A post-war deposition describes removal from Corinth to a town upriver by rail and by boat and lists a date. The witness states that a small sum was paid for washing and that pay for other days is still claimed. The officer's name is written as initials. The file contains an attestation by a clerk. The deposition places Corinth as a starting node. No further trace is included. A later song sheet printed for a church meeting includes a verse that mentions a model camp and a narrow road. The line does not match any known report. The tune is marked as familiar. The sheet uses simple type and no author credit. The date is 2 decades after the war. The sheet survives in a folder with other ephemera. A private letter printed in a regional paper says that streets were numbered and houses marked and that police kept order. The same letter says that coffee was cut for a time and that blankets were short. The writer does not offer a cause. He observes that order continued. The column prints his words without comment. A typesetter's smudge runs through one line. A quiet rite is described by a former child who says a piece of cloth was tied at the tent pole for each absence. The cloths were counted at dusk. No prayer is written. The recollection places the tent near a creek and a bottom. It mentions a teacher walking to a room counted in yards away. The teller does not add more. A small printed map in a bureau pamphlet shows lines from camps to new towns with plots for schools. The scale is small, but the symbols are clear. Corinth does not carry a label on the plate, but is in the traced path. The caption reads Movement of Freed Families. The pamphlet gives no testimony. The date places the plate in the first years of Reconstruction. A dream report taken down by a field worker closes with a sentence about lamps that are not in any other paper. The worker copies the sentence in full. He writes no interpretation below it. The next page begins a different interview. The file lists the county and the year. The handwriting is steady. A soldier's second letter mentions funerals without ceremony and lists 3 interments in a week. He does not connect the count to drums or songs. He notes that the place of burial is left blank on the form. He records that he stood night watch at a creek crossing. He writes that footprints were visible in mud at dawn. He seals the letter and posts it. An old singer says the drum answered after dark when the list was closed, and that the answer was one tone held and released. He connects the tone to a word about staying. He does not claim a miracle. He places the sound beyond the last numbered house. He says it kept breath slow. He does not add more. A press item after the war reports a meeting where former residents of wartime camps spoke of moving north. The item summarizes routes and lists towns where work was found. It prints a short roll of names with initials only. It notes that songs were sung between remarks. It calls the event a reunion. It does not give speeches verbatim. A closing recollection for this section places a thin board over a cup of water and says that the board made no sound that night. The teller says that on other nights a board near the door creaked on its own. The teller offers no cause either time. The water is poured at the creek in the morning. The memory ends at the ford. No clerk signs the page. A reflective alignment occurs as papers and voices pass each other without touching. A map arrow moves north while a verse repeats north as a single word. A letter lists reductions while a ritual counts stones to keep a tally without paper. A printed model stands next to a drum tone that refuses to be counted. A docket number fixes one claim while a dream lists lamps without number. Each line faces its partner and neither line explains the other. The file set for late December closes with routine lines and gaps. A return repeats half ration ordered for about 2 weeks and stops. A hospital book lists 2 deaths by fever and stops. A quartermaster abstract shows a loop where a signature should be and stops. The guard report states no disturbances observed and turns the page. The next page in that volume is missing and the index skips ahead. A private letter from a soldier mentions order at first light and the reduction of coffee and blankets. He writes that streets are swept and that a police detail makes its rounds. He adds that a drum tone at night is probably a work signal, then calls it a steady note with no roll. He does not follow the sound or name a source. He sleeps near the path to the yard and closes with a request for socks. The letter contains no mention of the creek. A teacher states that rooms are not yet sufficient and that lessons occur outdoors. She notes improvement from day to day and asks for slates and primers. She measures distance to the association rooms and yards and places her door within a short walk of the camp fence. She adds that breath shows in cold air and that writing on slate stops when fingers go numb. No enumeration of pupils appears with the note. The docket number places the letter in the same week as the ration cut. A chaplain repeats that order is maintained by ward masters and a small police force. He records a large amount of labor performed and states that in some places there is no pay. He proposes a schedule and a register of family groups to stabilize issues. The proposals are written plainly and filed. No follow-up from command is attached to that sheet. The attachment pin left a rust mark and no paper. An inspection memorandum prints the word model in the line for general condition. It records streets in good order and a systematized arrangement of houses. The hour column is blank. The route of inspection is listed and does not include times. The page ends without a note on rations or fuel. It is a form filled and returned. A court letter book in a nearby county captures petitions that mention workers absent since 1862 and last heard of at Corinth. One petitioner asks attachment of wages alleged due and another seeks relief from tax on stock with labor gone. The clerk writes received and names no person beyond the parties in the line. No decision sheet is bound with these letters. The docket cross-reference is recorded and lost. The entries are short and finished. A state office compiles a map after the war that traces dotted lines from temporary camps to towns along the rail. Lines begin near Corinth and turn north and east in short segments. The legend reads removals and gives dates from the first years of Reconstruction. No annotation for weather sickness or shortages appears on the plate. The cartographer signs with initials in the corner. The paper shows pinholes where it hung. A soldier on wood detail measures the distance from the camp to the association rooms as about 220 yards. He notes a guard over piles of boards and the shortage of nails. He records a broken axle on the road from the mill and mud at the ford. He writes that the work continues in silence and ends with a request for socks. He does not assign cause to the shortages. He posts the letter. A deposition taken later places a woman and 2 children at Corinth in winter and records tent assignment and washing work. The file copies a mark and cites an earlier Army memorandum to confirm presence. The witness claims arrears for days worked, and the clerk lists the names as spoken. The second page of the deposition is missing, and only the witness mark remains. No decision is bound with the file. The deposition is kept as entered. A newspaper paragraph near the end of the year prints industrious and orderly and repeats model. The paragraph attributes the words to a letter and prints no name. No figure follows the terms. A separate column reports affair with livestock and no relation to the camp. The paragraph stands as reputation. It offers no measure of adequacy. A spiritual variant recorded long after uses a river word and a cold water image without place. The refrain repeats 3 times at a low key. The leader asks to keep the pace soft and listeners supply the rest. The collector writes the melody as approximate and notes no fixed meter. The verse ends on a held syllable. The transcript carries no comment. A remembered practice sets a small stone at a threshold to mark who has eaten. The stone turns once when a cup is passed and turns back if the cup is missed. The teller states that the method holds account when light is poor. No doctrine is offered with the practice. The description stays with the movement of the stone. The account ends without explanation. A dream line copied by a field worker records a road with lamps and a voice counting. The worker writes the sentence in full and leaves no interpretation below it. The following page begins a different interview. The file lists county and year and gives the interviewer's initials. The dream is connected by the teller to counting boards in daytime and nothing else. No omen is claimed. The page is steady. A police roll assigns 2 men to night watch at the creek crossing. A separate note states that stones were placed by the ford to count feet. The guard book records no disturbance that night. The time book for the same shift is cited on another shelf and is not present. The creek line holds as place reference. No map adds detail to the ford. A ration abstract records coffee at reduced quantity and sugar limited. Cups pass once and pass twice in quiet order. An exceptions list is absent. The signature line shows a single loop and no name. No commentary is attached to the cut. The next abstract in the file picks up with ordinary issue. A burial return lists interments this week as 3 and notes no ceremony. A clerk later draws a short line where a number might go and stops. The place of burial is left blank on the form. The soldier who wrote home about funerals without ceremony does not name the place either. 2 records align on silence. The week passes. The inspection tally breaks on lottery and the frequency column is blank. Streets remain in good order on the next line. The tally resumes after the break without comment on the missing word. Do not speak the creek name after dark is a saying preserved by use. The tally does not record sayings. The form turns over and ends. A printed notice after the war asks for the whereabouts of a man last seen near Corinth in late 1862. The notice uses the phrase fate unknown. No reply appears in later issues here. A reunion item in another paper reports routes north and names towns where work was found. A short roll of names prints with initials only. The columns close without speeches. A former child states that a cloth was tied at a tent pole for each absence and counted at dusk. No prayer is written with the act. The tent is placed near a bottom and a creek and near a room counted in yards away. The count is done aloud and ends when the cloth stops the hand. No list is kept on paper. The statement ends there. The chaplain who called the place a model wrote that order was maintained and that much labor was done, and he also wrote that in some places there was no pay. The quartermaster set half ration for about 2 weeks. The teacher wrote improvement from day to day. The soldier wrote that blankets were short. The inspection form wrote model again. The lines remain in the same file and they do not meet. Night entries for the same period show watch at the creek crossing and nothing unusual observed. A second set of recollections says that a single tone answered from the far row after dark. The tone is not tallied in any return. A soldier attributes a night note to work detail and sleeps. An old singer keeps the word answer and stops. The documents and the voice lines face each other and do not move. A bell from a storehouse is mentioned in a quartermaster memo as damaged and replaced. No use is listed beyond store. No other bell appears in the week. An oral line mentions a bell heard once and says the bell had no owner. No date is tied to that line. The bell enters the record and leaves it. The road from the mill is named in a freight note that explains a broken axle and a delay. The phrase "the road keeps things" is held by a driver and remembered by a listener. The driver's affidavit is referenced and not enclosed. The proverb remains and the paper does not. The road is present in both forms and yields nothing further. The ford is named by a guard post assignment and by a singer who places a song across a creek in cold air. The assignment returns no incident, and the song says the key was kept low so breath would not burn. The ford is a location and a carry for sound. Neither line names the other. Both lines end. One last letter in this group returns to order at first light and to sweepings and to the absence of ceremony at burial. The letter does not add cause or resolution. A final deposition returns to arrears for days worked and to a claim placed and left pending. A small map returns to dotted lines leaving the area. The forms close. The voices close. No one writes again in this file set for that week. The inspection column stays blank. The docket mark does not appear. The drum tone reported by soldiers as a signal and by singers as an answer is not entered. The creek holds its word in the same place. The night watch says nothing further. The record set now stands assembled and labeled. Quartermaster abstracts and subsistence returns from late 1862 are present in the National Archives under quartermaster and departmental commands. Hospital ward books are filed under Surgeon General records. Post and provost paperwork rests within Adjutant General and departmental series. Engineer sketches are cataloged under Office of the Chief of Engineers. Chaplain's letters and printed summaries survive in manuscript divisions and published compilations. American Missionary Association correspondence and reports are preserved at the Amistad Research Center. Sanitary Commission memoranda are held at the Library of Congress and regional historical societies. County letter books and mill vouchers remain in local courthouses or in consolidated federal bundles. Newspapers are accessible through Chronicling America and regional microfilm. The files are intact where noted. Gaps are identified in the notes as missing leaves, blotted totals, or absent attachments. A second layer remains on a different shelf. Federal Writers Project interviews reside in the Library of Congress Born in Slavery collection and in state repositories. Song variants were copied by collectors in the early 20th century and are held in folklore archives. Porch-side stories and ritual descriptions are preserved in local manuscript rooms and compilations. These items are dated by interview rather than by event. Locations are present when the interviewer wrote them down. Names appear when the speaker allowed them. Where a teller links memory to Corinth, Mississippi in winter 1862, this script states the link and marks it as retrospective testimony. The songs, the drum notes, the creek phrases, and the dream of lamps are recorded as they were written. Certain statements align without requiring interpretation. Order is systematized, streets are in good order, and a model settlement is printed on inspection forms. At the same time, a ration cut occurs for roughly 2 weeks in late December. Coffee and sugar are reduced. Blankets are short, and medical admissions list fever, measles, and occasional removals to a separate tent. Work details haul lumber from Davenport mills. Houses are numbered. Ward masters are assigned. A police force is on the rolls. A county petition requests attachment of wages alleged due. A post-war deposition claims arrears for washing. A department circular later orders fair pay and lists of dependents. The administrative language remains steady across sources. Uncertainties are enumerated rather than resolved. A guard report states no disturbances observed on a night when several interviews later recall a single low drum tone. A burial return lists 3 interments with no ceremony and leaves the place line blank. A distance of about 220 yards separates the association rooms from the camp, but does not specify which street or gate. A newspaper paragraph repeats industrious, orderly, and model without identifying a correspondent. A voucher cites an attached list of names that is not attached. A time book for a specific night watch is on another shelf and not present. These absences are part of the file, not a conclusion. The final handling of names follows the same rule used throughout. Personal names from contemporaneous records are given as written when a document is quoted. Names from oral testimony are included when the interview text carries them. Otherwise, speakers remain unidentified and references remain general. Place strings are simplified for read-aloud clarity: Corinth, Mississippi, Davenport Mills, Association Rooms, Creek Crossing, Bottom Land. This keeps the voice from pausing on punctuation that the record itself does not require. Present tense narration indicates custody and condition of sources today. Past events are restated in the language they used then without added metaphor. Custody is clear in most cases. Quartermaster, Adjutant General, Surgeon General Engineers, and departmental command records are boxed and described in federal record groups. Sanitary Commission and Chaplain's papers are cataloged in manuscript divisions with call numbers. American Missionary Association records are accessioned and indexed at the Amistad Research Center. Local court letter books and mill account books are listed in county inventories. Newspapers exist in microfilm and digital scans with title, date, and page references. Citations point to stable containers, where an earlier page in this project noted a missing second sheet that absence has been confirmed during compilation. Where a docket mark promised a decision sheet, the promise remains unfulfilled in the present box. One unresolved note is maintained, as written a field worker who recorded a testimony that places the winter queue in the creek near Corinth is said in a later administrative line to have vanished 2 years afterward on the same road. The interview text survives with initials and a date. The administrative line appears in a staff memo in a separate folder. No follow-up locates the worker. The two items remain adjacent in this account only because they are adjacent in the repository catalog. They raise a question about continuity of witness and the durability of the paths that sources travel. The question is left open. The echo motif returns as inventory. Drums a single steady tone described by soldiers as a work signal and by oral sources as an answer after dark. No ledger tallies the tone. River or creek, a ford named in guard posts, and a cold line remembered in songs and placed beside a bottom in descriptions. No form explains the acoustic carry. Bell, a storehouse bell damaged and replaced in a quartermaster memo. A bell heard once in an oral line with no owner named. The two entries touch only by word. Dream, a road with lamps and a counting voice written in a field worker's hand. No contemporaneous plan shows lamps. Counting appears in orders, issues, and board tallies. The motif elements reappear in both shelves of the archive and do not cancel each other. What remains known is concrete. A camp of tents, huts, hovels, and shacks stands northeast of Fort College Hill across a small creek in a bottom within reach of the shops. Late December 1862 brings a ration cut of about 2 weeks. Work details haul boards, houses receive numbers, ward masters and police are assigned. Schools begin in incomplete rooms and sometimes outdoors. Improvement is reported from day to day. Medical admissions show common fevers and occasional segregation of smallpox. Petitions and depositions mention wages, arrears, and removals. Maps after the war trace dotted lines north and east. These facts retain their form across holdings. What remains unclear is also listed. The total number of civilians present during the cut week is not fixed by a surviving sheet. The effect of the reduction on non-military dependents is not computed in any abstract found here. The exact location of a burial ground used in the same week does not appear on an engineer sketch. The full list of names attached to labor details is referenced but absent. The inspection hour column is blank where a route is given. Songs, sayings, and ritual descriptions are dated by interviews rather than by events and cannot be used to time a specific night. These limits are not corrected in this closing part. The ending uses silence as method. A final set of pages contains no new entries for the week in question. The next dated items move on to ordinary issues. A follow-up letter from a teacher mentions slates and shoes and does not revisit the cut. A later chaplain paragraph restates order and pay concerns without a resolution attached. A soldier's later letter returns to sweepings at first light. The form of daily life resumes. The non-entry for the drum, the river word, the bell, and the lamps holds its place. In the present, the materials are out of the weather. Boxes close, call numbers align, scans load. Transcriptions remain consistent with the images. The echo motif persists in the file as parallel lines, a tone that never becomes a figure, a creek that never becomes a coordinate on a burial plan, a bell that is replaced in prose and heard once in memory, a dream that states lamps where no plan prints them. The lines repeat in the reader's head because they repeat in the holdings. No one writes again in this file for that week. The inspection column stays blank. The docket mark does not appear. The drum is not entered, the river is not named, the bell is not assigned, the lamps are not drawn, no one wrote again, but the drums kept answering. Maybe they didn't disappear, maybe we did.